The biggest weekend in BJJ history is in the books, and while I would love to start with all the amazing grappling on display, unfortunately, the promoters of both events have ensured I can't do so in good faith. While ADCC was once again trotting out Wagner Rocha and Cyborg Abreu, two men for whom Mo Jassim's harsh opposition over continuing to support a pedophilically abusive coach lasted right up until it was time to host the very next ADCC, the otherwise immaculate CJI event was blighted by the ever-present use of a simulated sexual assault to promote its intergender match. When Craig vs. Gabby was first announced, I expressed concern that nothing in Craig or the BJJ Bros community should lead us to believe it would do anything positive for women's grappling, and those concerns were unfortunately fully justified. In a sport where men abusing their female students and teammates is so prevalent, it's abhorrent to see the face of BJJ good guys continuing to build off false rape accusations and showing the many grapplers who look up to him that sexual assault in BJJ is definitely a laughing matter. Throw in the sexually suggestive moves he used throughout his disrespectful role with Garcia, and the cornering of a D-list comedian whose bit was tired when it debuted in the aughts, and you have one very ugly stain on an otherwise flawless masterpiece of a debut. Coming out of the weekend, the gross behavior of big names in the sport continued, with Craig sharing DMs with Gordon Ryan in which he not so subtly accused Ryan's girlfriend, Natalia Santoro, of sexual assault. While I won't sit here and speculate on the identity of the victim or the veracity of the accusations, context around it points to a truly horrible and heartbreaking situation where full sympathy should be with the alleged victim. In a situation like this, one in which it feels inevitable that Gordon's retorts will turn to weaponizing Craig's kiss, it's important to remember that neither party needs to be the good guy in a dispute. You can hold in your mind both that, should the victim in the situation Craig discussed be okay with how it's being handled, it's a good thing it's coming to light, in the event it actually does and serves as more than some Instagram point scoring in a dick swinging contest, and also that his behavior this weekend was still terrible. The kiss does not invalidate the accusations, nor do the accusations absolve the kiss. Sexual assault is a serious problem in BJJ, and only by addressing it and calling it out wherever we see it will we ever have a hope of cleaning it up and making this sport the safe, welcoming place we claim it is. Moving on to the actual grappling, or at least the structures that enabled it, CJI scored the weekend's most decisive and dominant victory that didn't come with free air travel. Coming into the event, the biggest question mark was how the unique MMA-inspired scoring system would work, and the general conclusion has been spectacularly. Despite the talent rate done on some divisions, between the overall depth of elite BJJ and the women's and lower men's brackets being nearly untouched, it's fair to say there were incredible and fun grapplers on both cards. And yet, watching day one of ADCC sandwiched between two CJI broadcasts was like turning onto an NFL game from the 70s at halftime of the Super Bowl. The round-based scoring system necessitated active offense for the entire match, while the simple who won the round method is far more approachable to casuals who, while still perhaps being unsure of its application in some rounds, will have found it far more intelligible than the often confusing, bordering on indistinguishable difference between what is and isn't points in more traditional formats. On a promotional level, CJI was a resounding success. For all the criticism of how it's a lot easier to talk about putting on a good show than to actually do it, the viewing experience from home was far better for the new blood. While some of this is the simple benefit of fewer brackets meaning no concurrent matchups, CJI still pulled off its broadcast and in-house presentation with few hiccups. ADCC, meanwhile, continues to take unforced L's. The practice of releasing brackets less than 24 hours before the event is a relic of the past, and for an organization claiming to look to expand to casual viewers, making it nearly impossible to get in on the highly popular trend of pick-em pools is a tremendous own goal. While simultaneous matches are a given with 10 brackets, 6 of them full size, sending your multicast feed to commercial breaks on a service viewers are paying $30 a month for is unconscionable. If all that spending can't afford a second broadcaster to allow for breaks, the least you can do is leave the feed up with arena sounds on. The impact of the announcing and fancy presentations is also severely undercut when nearly all of it happens when you're busy watching the two other ongoing matches. Fortunately, for the grapplers on the mat, there was rarely room for criticism, starting with world number 1 Ffion Davis. When Davis left ADCC, she cited a desire to increase awareness of women's grappling and continue pushing for pay equity in the sport, and both were as clearly achieved as her win on the mats. After once again making an elite opponent look like they didn't belong anywhere near the mats with her in a highly entertaining match before a huge audience, Davis used her post-fight interview to praise Dern, then immediately resumed her push for a high-paying women's bracket. While I would love to see women at the next PGF or CGI, as I've noted before, I'd love it even more if we saw the all-woman event she mentioned in her Q&A video. The incredible action of, and fan reaction to, both her match and those of the women at ADCC shows the audience and product are both there. All it needs now is a financier who believes in it as much as we do. If the men are upset, you can even throw us a token super fight. Another star performer has to be under 55 champion Adele Fornerino. With a performance that likely made her public enemy number 1 in Brazil, Fornerino not only claimed the lower division title with under 5 minutes of work on Championship Sunday, she then went out and showed that size was no problem either, capturing the absolute crown by taking out 3 women from higher brackets, including the over 65 champion and an all-time great in the semis and final. While the mildly antagonistic tone of her Ffion call-out wasn't for my taste, as someone who both is generally not into that kind of promotion, and for whom the idea of implying Davis wasn't willing to compete as her motivation for leaving rings hollow in light of both the positive effects to come of her departure and the unquestionable dominance she has shown when competing over the last year, that doesn't mean I'm not still incredibly amped for her performance or think she's wrong to call for Fion's offered big money match with the ADCC champion. Fornerino has been angling for a rematch since they shared the stage at Subversion Reign, and her performance was undeniably worthy of earning it. Perhaps the biggest shocker of the weekend in the women's division goes to Ana Carolina Vieira, who topped a division that oddsmakers had listed as the least up for grabs of the weekend. It's rare in a full field that an individual competitor is considered such a prohibitive favorite as to be on negative money like Helena Krivar was coming into the under 65 division. But titles are won on the mats and not at the bookies, and Vieira ran through a murderer's row that included Amanda Levy in the opening round and roughly million-time world champion Bea Mesquita in the semifinals before besting Krivar in the final. While it would have been fun to see her in the absolute, especially as an opening round win would have meant a final four of the three champions and either the returning plus 60 champion or the most decorated woman in the field, she still gets to take home a well-earned gold medal to my personal breakout star of the weekend, Bethany and the Bulldog. In the over 65 division, Rafaela Guedes added to her already impressive collection of no-gi titles. Already an IBJJF Pans and Worlds champion, Guedes came up one match short in her last crack at ADCC Gold before making no mistakes this time. While Nathalie DeJesus made her work for it, she got the job done and rounded out a set of the biggest no-gi titles on offer. While her run in the absolute division came to an end at the hands of the smaller Adele Fornerino, when Guedes appeared the more tired grappler late on, that's perhaps understandable when you consider she had spent more than 30 minutes in action with larger opponents to Fornerino's 10 against smaller ones coming into their bout. At the end of the day, a title and a semifinal appearance is a good weekend by any measure. Finally, some miscellaneous thoughts from the weekend. It was very funny seeing how differently the events handled each other, with ADCC often performing UFC levels of dancing around the issue, while CJI could barely keep ADCC's name out of its collective mouth. While I'm usually a fan of the Bertolos on the mic, and always a fan on the mats, the way Cade talked about Levi Jones' Leary irked me. To hear him tell it, you'd think he bumbled his way past a hobble field, as opposed to taking out two of the tournament favorites in one day with a dangerous and active guard that nearly won him $1 million. While much was made of scheduling the events on the same weekend, the Friday start to CJI meant fans and participants with obligations at both will have had little trouble accommodating. That said, starting a 10-hour broadcast at 3 p.m. local in a time zone that is equal to or west of 90% of your audience is a major miss to rectify next time out. Cycling back to the leaked DMs, it's worth noting that transphobia is still so normal in this sport that a fan favorite felt no concerns leaking his own "no you" use of it. While, if Gordon's claim is true that he earned over $1 million, it's the most damning piece of pay evidence anyone released, given that 8-0 with 7 subs double champion Kane and Duarch will have netted an announced $50K for that performance. And with that, we can take a collective exhale and recover from a busy but overall entertaining week of grappling. I, for one, am excited for the next one. Are you?